big crowd.
pretty
I'm happy.
with that. Very nice. And I'm actually, I think you got one of the most interesting panels here, folks. I'm a little biased in this, but we have to sort of rise to that occasion. Quite an interesting array of use cases in what we're calling NFTs for good. So people who are really interested in how we might use this technology to pursue, I suppose you could say, a social agenda and some sort of some big objectives that kind of go beyond some of the classic things we've been talking about today earlier in the session. Why don't we just go down the line though, and you guys can briefly introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the particular project that you're interested in. The seating arrangement wasn't exactly how I wanted it to work, but that's okay. We're mixing things up. David, you're starting up.
I'm David Noble, and I'm the founder, one of the founders of GunClear. GunClear is a sovereign store of data using NFT technology and some zero-knowledge proofs to prevent leakage of that data and surveillance between gun transactors, buyers and sellers of firearms.
Yeah, I'm Arnold Waldstein. I'm an advisor and investor in the crypto space and without, and I'm a storyteller and community builder by trade. And I came to this concept here after being involved with CryptoKitties and Bill Tai and Gigi Berson and a bunch of other people last year to launch the Hanu charity auction. And it's brought a lot of learning to me that I was going to share on this panel about where I think we can take this to a further extent.
If you guys don't know what Honu is, it's probably the most successful, at least financial story, which the funds that were raised for ocean conservation on Honu was the turtle cat, I suppose we'd call it, right?
Yeah, it was also on your slide this morning.
It was on my slide this morning, exactly. Nathan. Yeah.
So I'm Nithin Eapen. I'm a technologist. I'm an Uber libertarian, a crypto evangelist, a mentor, advisor, and speaker. So my life mission after finding Bitcoin, I've made it to be that I want to increase the use of crypto for everyone. I spend my time teaching people to use Bitcoin or any of these things. And I found that the biggest problem is adoption, because we still have only 6 million wallets in use for Bitcoin. That's really small when you compare 7 billion people on this earth and with 4 or 5 billion with a phone connection. So my goal was to see how I can invest in founders, or I can get new founders to do projects that I would like to invest in. So recently I did a TEDx talk, and the talk was about how we can disintermediate middlemen or godmen when we are sending money to God. So based on that, I funded a company, and I've just been talking about it because I might fund multiple companies on that side, because we all know somebody who send money to godmen or religious places of worship, and these middlemen become very powerful, just like the banks and the cartels. They issue fatwas, they can change where you vote, they can issue, they can speak about where you should vote in an election, whether it's in the US or in India. And if you look at the numbers, this is one industry that's never been touched by technology. You got 400,000 churches in the US that collects more than $200 billion a year. If you go to India, that's like 3 million temples. I'm not even counting the churches and mosques over there, because when you have 3 million temples, that's more than all the primary schools, secondary schools, and hospitals and all that put together. So this is a very big industry if you really look at it. And for the first time with the Bitcoin thing and with disintermediation, you have a way of making these gods as tokens or non-fungible tokens, and you can worship them on a phone, and you can take the middleman out, and as a group we can decide where to send that money to. So that's something I'm passionate about.
Right, so you've got a fairly wide array of use cases here. And I think one of the things that we just in the green room we were talking about, and Arnold mentioned this, is that there's this interesting belief aspect to this. And one of the nice things I find about NFTs is that they are, there's a subjectivity to them, because the value is assigned obviously by a market, but it's this unique one-of-a-kind player as opposed to a fungible token that is much more broad. And therefore, you can think of how different communities and different belief systems can assign value and create value around what they care about. So we're going to drill down a little bit more deeply into what these particular projects are about and why they matter. David, why don't you just walk through the experience of the gun owner and why an NFT, and also tell us a little bit about the zero-knowledge proof component that I think is really interesting here. And how this comes together to essentially resolve some of the concerns that people have for safety and security and background checks and the like?
So many of the issues around a gun ownership today centralize themselves either on gun control or gun rights politically, and it gets very charged. It's very emotional. What we're trying to do is provide an avenue for the digitization of all of that stuff that gets created in paper. Because in 1986, the federal government passed a law which says you can't have a database, a gun owner's database, or a digital registry. They were fearful that you would be able to be found by the government and have your guns stolen. And that's where that, not from my dead cold hand concept comes from. The gun owners particularly look at the government with distrust, not too different than the crypto community, not too different than a lot of communities when they're interacting with the government regularly. And therefore, we've had a series of stalls on any sort of regulation around guns. GunClear was founded as a voluntary participation between sellers and buyers of guns. When the idea around zero knowledge and actually CryptoKitties started to percolate into more mainstream media last year, that was the tipping point for us to really get going with GunClear, because it suddenly provided a technology that allowed you to record this in a safe and secure way from government surveillance, from Facebook, from Google, and own that data, be able to manage that data. The social good is that there's hundreds of thousands of guns that are stolen in America every single year. And if you don't own a gun or you haven't had a gun stolen, you don't think about it. But the great majority of gun-related crimes are committed with stolen guns, not guns acquired legally. We can always find an exception, but that's where the great majority of it is. And there's powerful disincentives to report a stolen gun. Namely, it's very hard to locate the actual owner of that gun. So why would you report it and risk any sort of liability? The guns then come back into commerce, oftentimes through a pawn shop or through some sort of peer-to-peer sale. And those items, there's no way for a buyer to know whether that gun was legally acquired or illegally acquired. For the first time, when GunClear comes to market, you'll have the ability to do that. And I think without zero knowledge proofs coming into play, I don't think you'll ever see an adoption, a willing adoption by the gun community. And that allows us to preserve the Second Amendment while also bringing technology to an industry that's desperate need of it.
So one of the things that occurred to me, is that what you're capturing in the NFT and then protecting with this encrypted wrapper of zero knowledge proofs is the gun's story, right? Its life cycle, and this I think is a key feature of the way we're all conceiving of NFTs as something very valuable here. That we need to understand the provenance of the transactions that we make with both the digital world, but what's interesting about all these cases in many respects, although Nithin, yours is in the mystical world, is that it's this interface between the digital world and this physical world, right? And so maybe Arnold, you can pick up on this, because you're talking about how we take this digital representation of value that can encapsulate a story over time and assign it in a practical way to the physical world. You've talked a little bit about coral reefs being tokenized perhaps as a way to incentivize their protection. How do we make that leap, and what are the key components of drawing that conception of value into the process?
That was a simple question.
Let me go big. It's the end of the day here.
That's
We're going to talk about God in a moment, so come on.
That's fine. Let me just backtrack a little bit. My passion point is simpler than yours. It's basically just environmental philanthropy. And so my belief is that, the only way that we're going to be able to take care of the planet and various things, whether they be species or the oceans, is if we find a way to economize this. And I came to this after a career working in storytelling and community building, but I really came to this is because when I did this project of Haunted the CryptoKitties very quickly, what we did is basically we worked with CryptoKitties and we made a cat that was half cat, half sea turtles. We located some projects in the Caribbean that were protecting sea turtles, and we then built a massive community around this, and then we used auctions as a ways to raise funds. And what we learned is very interesting is that a really lot of people really give a shit. So it was a huge community, and in a very short amount of time, we touched close to 60 million people. And the story was good, but it just kind of, they just surfaced. They surfaced from the tech world, they surfaced from across the environmental world, all, you know, embodied in the emotive story of this icon that was on the CryptoKitties platform. So this was really positive and helpful. But what we learned is that when we went to economize this, when we went and put an auction at the other end, the entire cycle failed, right? What we were doing is taking a community that had a lot of passion and using kind of an old school top-down way of raising funds. So what we actually had to do was go out and find an individual who was willing to write a check for $50,000 for us, and then we took it and we funneled to the communities. But the learning that came from this was that there's a possibility. The learning that came from this is that we can take natural things, whether they be reefs or turtles or any one of a number of type of things that are around the world, and wrap them in NFTs, which already have meanings, and break this friction between the offline and the online world, move them online into community basis, that you can come up with new ways to economize this. You know, and for example, one of the things we realized was that was very simple is that within the CryptoKitty contract, you can only sell it once and it goes to the next owner. Like how simple it would have been if our CryptoKitty buyer sold it, and again, monies could have come back into the charities, right? And again, another person could have got a tax deduction from it. So the NFTs are kind of this tool, this attachment that creates this object for community and storytelling and game playing to put together in a whole new way.
I'm glad you just actually anticipated the question I was about to ask, is whether or not there was this alternative to an auction to make this thing come alive would be that idea of the smart contract. The same way we were talking earlier about artists who gain, you know, upside every time their painting gets resold. The idea that the charity itself is also, you know, absorbing funds as the item, as the NFT moves from one participant to the next.
Yeah, I mean, to date, there's no way. I've spoken to every project, and there's a couple of really brilliant ones out there, and I'm going to join one of them as an advisor very soon. But, you know, there is no ostensibly clear way to economize belief in little micro pieces that are seamless, you know, as it is. A lot of the thinking is going into where this merges with various types of games, and these games become part of communities. So, and just as a point on that, you know, all day long they've been talking about interoperability between wallets. To make this work, really you need to have interoperability between communities, because you're not going to have this one centralized community. You're going to have a mass of decentralized people who believe in certain things for various reasons, and this object, whatever it might be, this one-to-one rhino or fish or whatever it is to a token, has to be interoperable between all these communities' belief, and in that exchange is where the economy is going to happen.
Right. Yeah, this is the hopping between communities and hopping between chains kind of question. But it's really fascinating that you sort of focus on belief and community as a way to instantiate that value in the first place, right? That there's a commonality to it, which is a great segue to Nithin, what you're doing. And when you first described to me what this was, I thought, oh, I get it eventually. I was like, okay, God, how does that come into it? I thought, oh, it's just it's a charity transparency play that, you know, if you're giving money to a church, you want to make sure that it's going to good use. But you sort of pulled me back and said, no, that there's this conception that when you're actually giving the money, this is your tokenized representation of the God to which you are granting money. That this is this ancient thing we've been doing for years. Can you break that down a little bit more, and you know how that becomes a value proposition for the devout people that want to make this sacrifice?
Sure. So in reality, gods or money, end of the day, is this collective fiction. It helps us build communities. That's what makes us powerful. And if you're referencing
Yuval Harari.
Yeah. So based on that, so in reality, we like those stories and we do this. But the problem is, in this particular case, for gods, which is a virtual fictional concept, we have made real life idols and places of worship because we are humans, we need touchy-feely things. All right, there you go. You have these things where you're sending money to because you're assuming you are sending money to God for whatever favors that you have received. It could be mental peace, or it could be a wish that you prayed for and got it. Okay. Now the problem over there is it goes to this middleman. And how much due diligence are you doing on that middleman? Like when you invest in a company, you're checking on the founders, you're looking at EBITDA, you're looking at all those numbers before making an investment. But when you send this money to the godmen or gods, how much due diligence do you do? You practically do nothing. You don't know where they are spending the money because you see that eventually some mega church or televangelist buy 5 jets or multi-million-dollar homes, and then you get pissed. But are you changing the way you're doing it? So here, and there are 2 things. One is the remittance part. There's a platform that can be built for remittance, which makes easy, cross-border remittance to the place of where you want to send it. It could be the place of worship. That's good. The second thing is the God himself. It is in a physical form. It's high time you bring it to the virtual form. It is a virtual concept. Bring it to the virtual form. Bring it to your phone. Like in Hinduism, there's a concept that you pray to a stone, the stone gets power. Okay, if that's the case, you pray to your idol, it gets power. Bring your idol to your phone. You pray to the phone gets power. Now you can carry your idol with you. Now as a collective, you can decide who you're sending money to. Where is that end point? Who gets that money? Because now you can choose. Do you want to send that money to UNICEF? Oh, by the way, UNICEF only sends 7 cents on a dollar to the kids. So maybe UNICEF is not a good idea. We've got to find somebody who send 90 cents or 80 cents at least, right? So there the voting can come as a community. You can decide where it's going for. And it is changing this industry. You've got to look at the numbers. You're looking, as I said, 400,000 churches, $200 billion in US, 3 million temples, another $100 billion over there. This money can be done or can be sent more efficiently than how it's being done today. What more do you need? And the main thing for me is I want people to use cryptos, and this is one space that's not regulated. Because if I start, trying to tell them about money and using this, most countries this is banned. You can't use it there. You can't give it to them. Like take India. They've stopped banks to accept crypto from the exchanges. So there goes that. They are choking the system. But if you're doing it through gods or something like that, nobody cares. They're usually tax exempt in any country. So this is a great place to start. You can get in adoption. For me, the adoption is the thing that I'm looking for. I don't care whether they use the God token or don't use any specific token. I just want them to use Bitcoin or whatever is that real thing that we're going to substitute for money. But this is the starting point.
David,
I was going to say that's one of the early stage thoughts behind GunClear was that the crypto aspects are so complex that people have to just believe, right? You just have to believe in it. And for adoption, you have to find people willing to believe, right? Looking to believe in something. And
maybe last word, Arnold, if you don't mind.
I mean,
where does that come in?
I think the intersection of belief and community and connection is what this is all about. And I just want to throw one little thing in here because it was interesting because I'm hearing you talking and I'm realizing for my needs, for the bias that I bring to this discussion, crypto is less useful than NFTs. NFTs are more useful for my bias because they're more benign, they're more programmable, they have value outside of a currency system, and they carry a lot of things with them. So if you really have a dream that you can get rid of concepts like philanthropy and insert concepts like ecological economies, you have to have objects that carry value, that transfer, more than you need to have currencies that create the money around them.
End of the day, it is faith, right? The first users in Bitcoin, they had faith that the rest would follow.
I'm sure
purely faith.
Right, and we needed a godhead in Bitcoin as well. Satoshi Nakamoto was effectively the god. All right, that's all we have time for, folks. Sorry, no time for questions, but round of applause for the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.